So, Alex, how many books have you read this year?
This year, I unfortunately have not been reading very much. I've only.
Oh, shame on
I know, I know. I mean,
you. Dang.
well, last year I read 80 books, and the year before that I read about 104
Mm-hmm.
for the year. This one, my trajectory is looking like 50 because I've been so busy doing this, that, and the other thing, which is not an excuse, but nevertheless, I do get a good book in every now and then. One book that I read last year that really stood out to me was A Hobbit, a Wardrobe, and a Great War by Joseph Lockton. I loved it so much, I actually gave it to you. And
Yes.
to my complete surprise, you actually liked it.
I liked it. I liked it enormously.
I was very, very much blown
And the
away.
reason I liked it was because it was a whole book about the necessity of transcendent things.
Well, for those of you who have not heard of Joseph Lockton's book, by the way, he's a professor at King's College in New York. You don't know that?
College?
It's the King's College.
Oh, my.
Yes. So,
But he's a good writer. He's a very good writer.
Oh yeah. What he does is I expected it to be more, this is what Tolkien said, this is what Lewis said. No. He gets into their minds and says this is what they were thinking.
Right.
Now this is if you haven't read either Tolkien or C.S. Lewis's books before, it's not necessary, but it certainly amplifies the power of both authors. If you've read Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, you'll know that he was a big universe builder. He loved the classical works and the classical everything. Lewis, by the same token, he was a professor of medieval literature at Oxford University before it was the homosexual heaven. Yeah, that's what he did. And what it does is he analyzes both of their work in the context of they were both veterans of the greatest tragedy of their time, which at the time was World War I. And they were living, as civilians during World War II. It was horribly tragic to see young people, their best friends, die. He chronicles all the different people they knew, their best friends that were killed right in front of them. And he talks about how both of them were effectively the bulwarks of transcendental values in this giant world of despair, because Europe, which effectively was the intellectual hub of the world, and North America were just devastated and miserable.
When God died. That's when God died, and that's when we killed God.
Right.
And the whole point of talking about Tolkien and Lewis is to present the fact that they were the pushback to the death of God theology, which was sweeping post World War II England and Europe. And actually, they go back to in this book. They actually go back to the interregnum, the time between the wars, when the expectations were raised and were high, and people did believe in transcendent values. They believed in monarchs, they believed in kings, they believed in chivalry. They believed that women were to be respected. You opened the door for a woman. You treated a woman as the procreator, carrier of your children. The idea of a woman taking a job was anathema. There was this horrible notion that a woman would be an actress on the stage or would take a job in a defense plant or anything of that nature. So what this book does is it weaves together the pre-World War II expectations of transcendence and then the war, the horror of the war. As someone put it to me the other day, God went up the chimney at Dachau. I think it's a beautiful, compact way.
That is very on the edge.
Yeah. God went up the chimney of Dachau. Now, if you don't know what Dachau is, Dachau was one of the most notorious extermination camps for Jews, Gypsies.
And if you don't know what going up the chimney means, you better study up your history.
Yeah, we don't even want to cover that if you don't know that.
No.
You don't know. No, but seriously, folks, the idea that transcendence is no longer taught in schools, the idea that we no longer write about it, we no longer philosophize about it. Another person was telling me the other day that as bad as Heidegger, Troy and I were talking about this, as bad as Heidegger was, a German philosopher who was a real Nazi, he was a member of the Nazi Party until the day he died. Okay, but the thing that impresses people about Heidegger, and people who still read Heidegger, is that he still believed in transcendent values, and he was against modernity. He was very set against modernity and modernism. Yes.
Could you define that?
Well, he lamented the rise of communism. This is why he was a Nazi. People don't realize that the Nazis were anti-communists, even though they were fascists.
They were anti-communist, but not anti-Marxist, but not necessarily anti-socialist. They literally mean National German Socialist Workers' Party.
Right, but their notion of socialism was National Socialism.
Correct.
Which means that Germany first, the German people first, which is why they're always compared. Trump is always compared to the Nazis in this sense because it's a form of nationalism. It's radical nationalism. But
it's basically communism for white people. But yes,
yeah. But the idea that God went up the chimney of Dachau really chilled me to the bone. It really got to me because no phrase I've ever heard really encapsulated what happened. The Second World War was so horrible. The atrocities were so unimaginable that humans could do such things to each other that this is why the very first time you hear a professor, an atheist philosopher professor mentioning no names, attacking the existence of God, they always do it on how can there be a good God with so much evil in the world, right?
Because Christians have never heard that one before.
Yeah. But I'm saying it's frontlined these days. The basic attack on God these days in colleges and universities, the favorite argument by atheists these days is the argument that there cannot be an all-good God because babies are bayoneted and clubbed to death on battlefields in war. And if God were good, he would never allow that to happen. It's impossible. So that's why the book is valuable, because the book points to the ways in which God can be good and evil can exist in the world, because God doesn't choose it, because humans choose it.
What Lockton effectively does is he weaves together. I don't want to go on too long if we're pressed for time. I'll be very quick.
Yeah, wrap it up.
He talks about how Tolkien, with his work, brings high fantasy into the mind. Basically, the reality of war and terrible darkness, aka the Nazis, and the war and all this horrible stuff. But he puts, even though they're elves and hobbits and all these magical creatures, he makes them human in the sense that they have friendship. They have these camaraderie. This I will do anything for my friends or for my kingdom or for this and that. Tolkien or C.S. Lewis, on the other hand, what he does, he's so smart. He's most known for his Chronicles of Narnia series, where he basically tells the same story but for children. And that is absolutely critical. It's completely it's untapped nowadays. He went right for what counts. He went towards kids. And he also talked practical theology. The easiest way to boil it down is Tolkien talked practical application of transcendent values. C.S. Lewis, on the other hand, taught theological and moral application of those principles.
Yeah, that's a good wrap up. I'd like to talk with you. Maybe we'll do the next podcast on this one, Harry Potter.
Ooh, that'll be so much fun.
and let's wrap this one up. So, folks, if you got time to read this Lockhart book. It's a great book, and it'll really explain to you now in a narrative fashion about the history of the interval between the two wars, and then exactly how God went up the chimney in Dachau. Anyway. Thanks a lot, Alex. That was a really good one. I learned a lot. I always do with talking to you. And we'll talk.
Yeah, we learned a lot talking about the same book, right? That we both read.
And talking to each other.
Take care.
Bye.